Welcome to episode 156 of the Half Point Per Podcast. I'm your host, Evan Riggs, joined as always by my co-host, Dalton Willie. No Johnny tonight. He is picking up the keys, getting a new apartment. Our boy is becoming a bona fide New York City man. So proud of him. Did he by chance send you a Snapchat of the place right by his apartment?
If he did, I didn't look at it. So.
I hope he didn't. It was just to me. It segues us really nicely into swimming lessons talk if we have any update, because Johnny now lives right next to it. It's like Goldfish's like swimming journey or something like that. Do you have it?
The first one is his apartment. Walking around it. I'm getting a tour. This is very important. News to audio only listeners.
Oh, even video. I mean, we're not showing Johnny's place on video. So.
Okay, he's looking outside. It's a beautiful view. Yeah, Goldfish Swim School is right next to his apartment.
So, how's Dalton Swim School been going?
Well, we graduated on Thursday. The thing school starting on Tuesday. So, unfortunately, it's not over for me just yet. The swimming saga will continue for another month into November. And from there, we'll reconvene and decide as to whether or not we need a third month or a fourth month or maybe even a 12th month. You just never know with these things.
Just never know with these things. And what you never know about Dalton is how rookies are going to translate into the NFL. And we're going to talk about that today. We've got rookie check-ins coming today. And this has been an electric rookie class. You know, some positives, some negatives, but by and large, the highs of this class so far have been unbelievable. So we've got a lot of fun guys to talk about. And, you know, we could just jump right into it. But really quickly, I did just want to touch on one piece of breaking news that does have some relevance to a rookie. And mainly, I just want to make a bold prediction that, okay, I'm going to say this now. I don't know if I really believe it. Okay, now is when, at 3:02 is when I start the TikTok clip, if I'm going to put this out there. I think Derek Carr may have started his last game for the Saints this year. Is that crazy?
I mean, we'll see what Spencer Rattler has.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the Saints team, they look good for 2 weeks. Now they don't. And the bigger problem is if he comes out there and he produces a little bit, why not roll with the rookie? Because Derek Carr's contract, I think he's up at the end of the year. There's an out at least.
Yeah, who knows with all that. But this was a rookie in Spencer Rattler who was very impressed from the preseason. Yes, preseason, I know. We'll see what it looks like in the regular season. But think about Derek Carr. Like Pat McAfee always says, the Chiefs is the Chiefs. Derek Carr is Derek Carr. We got 2 weeks where we thought, okay, maybe Derek Carr in this new offense is going to ascend. We're going to get an amazing Derek Carr season like we got the year he was going for the MVP before he broke his back. And as it turns out, Derek Carr is still Derek Carr. There are some highs, there are some lows, and he is a very average NFL starting quarterback. So you know what? Let's just throw it out there. Let's get the rookie in there for the rest of the season, because I do think there is more upside, certainly more downside, but more upside to playing Spencer Rattler and just kind of seeing what you have the rest of the way.
Yeah. And, I mean, this offense was cooking for a while, and if he can get that deep ball going, Chris Olave said some positive things about seeing Rattler out there, and I'm just thankful we don't have to watch Jake Haener play.
Yeah, no, I at the end of that game, I was kind of, because I have Olave, I was kind of thinking about it. I was like, man, if this is the dude that we have at quarterback the next couple of weeks, this is going to be really rough. But then I was like, you know what? They probably just didn't want to throw Spencer Rattler out there in a game they had no chance of coming back in against a really good defense on the road, Monday Night Football, just a terrible spot. So I'm glad that has all worked out, and I am very excited to see how that goes for the rookie quarterback in New Orleans, who, by the way, was named the starter earlier today on Wednesday, for those who may not have seen that. A quarterback who has been the day one starter and has been as good as any quarterback in the NFL so far this season, Dalton, is Jaden Daniels. And we don't have to talk a ton about Jaden Daniels in this, I don't think, we kind of did last week, but obviously we can't not talk about it. I mean, through 2 games, he's over 1,100 passing yards, just 4 passing touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But the real moneymaker is 300 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns. He's the QB2, number 2 overall in fantasy scoring as well, behind only Lamar Jackson and both of those metrics. And here's the real kicker. He has more top 3 finishes so far this season if you go back to week 1 of last season. Not all those combined, but just individually more than all of those guys. So he has been impressive. And do you have anything else that you kind of want to add or amend or update or whatever after we talked about Daniels a little bit last week?
I mean, I would just say there's still some concern there for me with the Cliff Kingsbury offense and how it sputters out in the second half of the season. That's certainly a trend that could have changed at this point. Until they played the Browns, they played some of the worst defenses. He looked good against the Browns. The Browns also played terribly on offense and set up that offense for the Washington Commanders to really do whatever they would want. And it's still concerning. He has almost 50 carries through 4 games. Like he's averaging I think 11 and a half a game. And if that keeps going, there's just such a high risk with that one because he's running into guys and you just don't like to see that.
Yeah. And, a couple things. I saw Robert Mays make this point on Twitter. I wish I have not listened to the Athletic Football Show, so I don't have the specifics of what exactly he means, but I think we kind of know some of the limitations that maybe Jayden Daniels showed in college. He made the point on Twitter that defenses really haven't been able to make him have to address those weaknesses in the NFL yet, which, I mean, that's a double-edged sword. You wonder, okay, what happens when that does eventually happen? Because it will eventually happen. But also, it's great that he's been good enough to where that hasn't had to happen. He's been so overwhelmingly good that they've just been dominating, especially the last couple of weeks, dominating in ways that accentuate his strengths. Now, I will say, and to your point, the Browns matchup, not as scary as previously because of just the offense and just that whole team feels kind of lifeless right now. And they have played a lot of very nice matchups so far. So that is my one kind of thing I'm hung up on outside of, the playbook, all of that stuff we talked about last week and you hit on a little bit. But it's really hard to still not call him a top 5 fantasy quarterback rest of season until we're kind of proven otherwise, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he definitely locked and loaded for that.
Yeah. All right. Next guy, a guy who is not locked and loaded for top 5, but we are curious in how he can do as far as propping up a couple of guys in that Denver Broncos offense. That is Bo Nix. Through 5 weeks, Bo Nix is the QB 17 on the season. He has 866 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and most surprisingly, I think for me so far, 119 yards rushing and 3 rushing touchdowns for Bo Nix. Now, I would expect maybe the yardage is probably fine, pretty reasonable. The touchdowns, I mean, 3 in 5 games, that is probably an outlier. That it could continue to happen, but you can't predict that to continue to happen. And Bo Nix, to me, he has gotten better since the beginning of the season. I mean, it was almost impossible not to based on where he started. He started off almost at rock bottom, but he has been pretty decent the last couple of weeks. And to me, again, this is not a conversation of can I start Bo Nix at any point this year, because unless we really are in a bad spot quarterback matchup-wise, combined with a great matchup for him, I just don't see that this year. But the question is, can Cortland Sutton be a thing in fantasy football with Bo Nix? And can, I guess, Javonte Williams, right, is kind of the by default answer still in that backfield. Can he be good enough for Javonte Williams to have real fantasy value? And, he did make probably more plays last week than he has at any point. They have a good D-line, but they don't have anything else beyond that. And I think I'm still very much on the fence as far as what I've seen so far and just what I think he'll be able to do the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Bo Nix hasn't looked like a complete NFL star I have, or he is the oldest quarterback in this class. And if you look at him and Jayden Daniels has at least been able to diagnose coverages and hit players in stride. I know their weapons are vastly different, but in a standalone, he has 3 rushing touchdowns through 4 games, and that's really propped him up. As a passer, he's leaving a lot on the field. He's leaving a lot of guys open, and I mean, he's hyper fixated on Cortland Sutton, who has 65% of the team's total air yards. So,
Oh my God.
it's wild. Cortland Sutton is a guy that if you have on your bench, I don't mind keeping a hold of. But the quality that Bo Nix has put out there, combined with the coaching decisions on this team, like offensively, they are running just really gimmicky, low A-dot throws, and then just hoping somebody breaks one and nobody is. So, I mean, as far as my rookie check-in with Bo Nix is, there's a lot to be wanted, and I'm not too excited about his future as an NFL player, let alone a fantasy player.
Yeah, I agree with you. We do have a question in chat that I want to get to before we jump ahead here. Full PPR with the news of Michael Pittman out, which, in case people missed that, he is potentially going on the IR with a back injury. We'll see, but he's not playing this week for sure. Does he start Jawan Jennings against the Seahawks or Alec Pierce, who we just picked up, against the Titans? He could also go pick up Rashad Bateman. What I would say about Rashad Bateman is water is wet. He was on the injury report today. Now, what does that mean? I don't know. But I think I would, at the very least, wait out the Thursday game until the weekend. I don't think I'm playing Jim because, like, Debo's play. Like, I didn't miss something. Debo and Ayuk are both healthy. I think George Kittle is at least on track to playing.
He went healthy today. He's not even questionable. So
yeah, so a fully stocked receiver and tight end room, at least. Obviously, no Christian McCaffrey, but a fully stocked receiver and tight end room probably means that Jawan Jennings is a dart throw at best, whereas Alec Pierce, it may depend a little bit on which quarterback plays, but if you get Anthony Richardson, I love the Alec Pierce dart throw. But I mean, even if it's not Richardson, he just had a good game with Joe Flacco, right? Like, he's a top 8 receiver right now, and part of that's because he just put up 20 with Joe Flacco at quarterback. So maybe I take that back, kind of what I said. I think I'm probably going Alec Pierce no matter who starts at quarterback.
Yeah, I would say I would actually go with Rashad Bateman here, pending health, obviously. They play the Washington Commanders, who have given up the most yards to outside receivers, and that is the Bateman role. And I think it's going to be a pretty profitable role for him in that game. Knock on wood. We've talked up Bateman a lot on this show in the past, but I still think the talent's there. Jawan Jennings, I mean, really, he's wide receiver 8 for his massive, 55-point game.
Yeah.
And the targets aren't always going to be there for him, especially with Ayuk looking back to his proper self last week. So I think I would go with Bateman. Alec Pierce is just a dart throw, like Evan said. The Titans defense scares me a little bit. And Richardson going up against them, I think they might take away some of his weapons, especially without Pittman there. They can be a little more cohesive on that defensive front to take away the deep shots.
You're welcome for the help, Dylan, for the massive help we have provided. Hopefully, we've at least given you context on both sides of the fence there. So
I'd go Bateman if I were you, as long as he's healthy. Otherwise, then I would go Alec. I would not go Jawan Jennings regardless.
Yeah, we're giving no Jawan Jennings at least, but we're split on the other two. All right, Marvin Harrison Jr. next up on the rookie check-in list. He has 17 receptions for 289 yards and 4 touchdowns. He is the wide receiver 13 through 5 weeks so far this season. And, you know, I saw this stat. I wish I knew if it was half point, standard scoring, or full PPR. It doesn't really make that big a difference, but I just want to know. He has scored something like 80% of his fantasy points in first quarters this year, which just, that tells me that this is still a team that is struggling to figure out how to fully integrate him into their game plan and past the first 15 scripted plays. And I do think that will improve. So there's I think we're probably at about the right spot with him where he has the ability to probably be lower scoring wise if guys, a lot of injuries, some bye weeks for key guys already. But also he has a ton of air yards, and there's a lot of opportunities I think that's been left for him on the field. And I do think he will get more involved as the season goes on. So I do think just as far as how he looks as a player, he's getting open. He showed some of that great body control in the air, make some of those catches. He looks of his NFL career.
Yeah. I'll take the early season victory lap for us there. That I think it was pretty good not to rank him as a early second round pick. I mean,
yeah, because he's wide receiver 13, but he had one mega week. So from fantasy production wise, you've not really been happy for most of the weeks you've started him.
No, he has 4 touchdowns, and he's been touchdown or bust. Even one of his touchdown games, I think he had 5 catches for like 39 yards. So it's been a really up and down season for him. The Cardinals haven't needed to rely on him because their run game, and then they got blown out one game and they end up benching a lot of their starters. But he's having a very up and down start to his NFL career. After week 1, people were saying he's slow. It's just a tough road for him because he's an outside X receiver who wins in physical matchups with a quarterback who historically is a guy who takes the easy layup shots. And that's what this offense has been doing with guys like Michael Wilson and Trey McBride, where they're taking the easier throws. And Marvin Harrison can win those one-on-one matchups, but sometimes you need an elite quarterback to identify those and trust you. So, I mean, I'm not feeling bad about him. I still think he's incredibly talented. But I think the guy we're going to talk about next is who we were more excited about and has proved a lot more as far as his long-term dynasty value.
Yeah, and has certainly proved us wrong this season. And that is Malik Neighbors, who I think we were both questioning the ADP. Turns out ADP not high enough for Malik Neighbors.
We were questioning it rightly. We don't tell people how we were questioning it.
I mean, I think the process was right. However, the player has just proven that the process didn't really matter in this scenario. I mean, he's the wide receiver 8 and he missed the game and he plays for the Giants. So like those 3 things all being a fact are pretty incredible. He has 35 catches, 386 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Again, that is with 1 missed game. And he has been kind of unlike Harrison, where he has 1 big game propping him up. Neighbors has been every bit as good as the fantasy numbers and just the real life NFL stats would indicate. I mean, he's made some unbelievable contested catches. When he's not doing that, he is seemingly wide open on almost every other play. And the funny thing with him is if he can get on the field this week, he's going to probably be wide receiver 1 through 6 weeks or whatever we'll be through after this week because they play the Bengals. And you want to talk about a secondary that you want to play, it is the Cincinnati Bengals. Before last week, so before the week that he missed, he trailed only Cooper Kupp in first read target share, and Cooper Kupp obviously is an even smaller sample size. I mean, he's getting ridiculous target share, and he is producing at a level that I just did not think possible for him in his rookie year, because of Daniel Jones, and also just he's a rookie, so you just never know how good those guys are going to be right away, even the really elite ones. And he has been every bit as good as you could have hoped.
Yeah, and then Daniel Jones goes out last week and looks good against a good Seahawks defense without Malik Neighbors. So positive expectations around that offense all around, and you just can't dispute the things he's doing on the field. 2 weeks ago, he should have had a touchdown, and he just got underthrown by Daniel Jones, had to stop and get the ball. But, I mean, we're talking about just 35 receptions through 3 games. Like, that's an insane target share. It's like, what is that, 11 a game, 12 a game?
Yeah.
And he does really good things with the ball in his hands. I think in Dynasty, he's the wide receiver 2 right now in keep trade cut. So,
wow. I don't think I quite buy that yet.
I wouldn't either. But
he's at least in that neighborhood.
He's also on pace to be Odell Beckham Jr.'s rookie records with the Giants. Not like the numbers, because I know Odell didn't play the full season, but like targets per route run, receptions per game, yards per game. He's on pace to beat Odell in a lot of those, which is something that I didn't think I would see in a long time, considering how bad the Giants have been.
Well, even if he beats Odell's yardage, that's obviously still impressive, because Odell missed 4 games, and it was only a 16-game season back then, but he still had, I'll look up his yardage in a minute. He still had a pretty crazy yardage season. A guy that, he's pretty hard to evaluate, in my opinion, so far, but we're going to give it our best shot, and that is Rome Odunze, a guy that we're obviously both big fans of, as were, a lot of people, obviously. Pre-draft top 10 pick, 15 catches, 206 yards, 1 touchdown. He's the wide receiver 58. Between his own health and just the health of the offense, Dalton, what do you make of Rome Odunze's start so far?
I mean, we're with Marvin Harrison. I think he just needs more time, and Malik Neighbors, I think, is a verified stud. This is a guy I don't think anybody should be drawing conclusions to yet. The Shane Waldron experience has been pretty terrible for the Chicago Bears, except for their electric game against the Carolina Panthers, which just about everybody has. And in the one game, he was treated as a wide receiver one. He had over 100 yards and a touchdown, and I think he had 7 catches. So he played really well in the one game where he was getting wide receiver one usage. Last week, this route tree was incredibly condensed. 34 routes for DJ Moore, 34 for Odunze, 32 for Keenan Allen. No other wide receivers on the Bears ran a route. So it's pretty condensed, so you can trust that he's going to have his performances. In a redraft league where I have other options, he's probably not a weekly start and more of a matchup start. But he's shown that he has the talent we thought he had. But I just need to see more out of this Bears offense and the infrastructure in Chicago to believe that he's going to be able to be one of those stars that we were thinking he was in the draft.
Yeah, and so a couple things that are at least positive so far, if you're just thinking about purely this season, is what you mentioned, that he is in kind of the circle of trust as far as guys running routes and being on the field. And Keenan Allen hasn't exactly come out and set the world on fire and made me think, okay, he's still Keenan Allen. So it is still, I think, very much in the realm of possibility that Rome passes up Keenan Allen at some point throughout the season. I mean, Rome's highlights, just not even highlights as far as with the ball. If you just go look and look at his highlights running routes, he's been more impressive, I think, in that regard than Keenan Allen so far. He is one of those guys that, because of the situation, because of the stats, whatever, you have to kind of go watch him just run routes, not get the ball, and be like, okay, yeah, that was pretty impressive. I like that. I like what I've seen so far. I mean, you mentioned the stuff with the offense. He's had a 52.4% catchable target rate this year, which is 83rd among 86 qualified receivers per PFF. And Caleb Williams has thrown the highest thrown the highest inaccurate throw rate, 4th highest in the NFL so far this season, per PFF. And then, like I kind of talked about already, week 1, he looked fine, got hurt in that game, played week 2, probably shouldn't have. And it's like, I just don't know how healthy he was there for a few weeks. So hard guy to evaluate. You're not starting him. You're not cutting him if you can avoid it. I do still think there's value to be had there in season long. And in Dynasty, I'm certainly not flinching on Rome Odunze at all.
Yeah, definitely not a sell if you own him in Dynasty. I don't think he's a sell at all.
No.
If you can get him a buy at a cheaper price, definitely a buy. But if I own him, I'm holding and seeing what there is, which should be the rookie treatment 4 games in for almost anybody we speak about.
Yeah.
Except maybe I did see, going back to an earlier conversation, Jaden Daniels is number 1 overall in keep trade cut. Unless I'm really ready to win a title this season, I might capitalize on that and see how silly some of my league mates are willing to go with those trades.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. I wouldn't be opposed to that. Another guy who I have seen in some wild 1-for-1 straight ups through the first month and change of this season, Dalton, is Brian Thomas Jr. He has had a wonderful start to the season. 22 catches, almost 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, wide receiver 5, and he is our yards per route run king. So far this season, it is him, it is Jamar Chase 1, followed by Justin Jefferson, followed by Brian Thomas Jr. through 5 weeks, all time on yards per route run, and however long that's been kept track of on PFF. So he has been obviously very good this season. But he's a guy, like, didn't you send me a trade or tell me about it? Like, someone said that they'd trade Justin Jefferson for Brian Thomas straight up.
That was a Twitter conversation.
Yeah, so like, I get the sense that I may be a little bit lower on Brian Thomas still than some, but I love Brian Thomas, loved him coming out, still love him. He's been very impressive, and it is a little bit disconcerting that the Jags are 1-4. Now, they did just win the 1, so we'll see. But disconcerting that 1-4, and one of my keys before the season for the Jags was like, how quickly can Brian Thomas make an impact on this offense? And he is doing that both statistically, and just if you go just look up Brian Thomas on Twitter and watch some clips of him not getting the ball, but the attention he's drawing, he's doing all the things for this offense that you would want to open things up for others and to obviously have a big season himself. And that has not contributed to winning as much as you would have thought before the season if that did happen. But just from a fantasy perspective, I mean, it has been an awesome start. He had the fastest speed of any ball carrier last week on his long touchdown, 22.15 miles per hour. Reminder, this guy is similar size to DK Metcalf, probably maybe not quite as buff, but he is of that similar build. So big dude, very fast, and has a little nuance to him running routes, and that is pretty scary. And I am a firm believer in the Brian Thomas wide receiver 2 propaganda for the rest of the season. Probably not top 12, but definitely wide receiver 2. And then for Dynasty, I mean, Dalton, I'm sure you're feeling on top of the world about where he's at right now.
Yeah, I'd say he's the most surprising out of the rookies so far, especially when you look at the top 35 picks and the wide receivers that went. Obviously, you have the 2 top dogs in Neighbors and Harrison. Then you have Odunze, Worthy, Keon Coleman, Jalen Polk. Out of all of those, Brian Thomas was definitely the guy who I still had a lot of questions about coming into the draft because he ran 2 routes and he was a really unrefined runner. Mm-hmm. If you go watch some of his slant releases, he already looks like he's cleaned up some of that route running, and he established himself as the best player very quickly on this receiving core. I know it's just Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk, but those guys are NFL vets who have been doing it for a while.
Well, and Gabe Davis, I kind of, turn my nose up at that. But Christian Kirk is a real NFL receiver who I think is at least pretty good. And we just have to separate the contract from the player, I think, when we talk about Christian Kirk.
Yeah, and he's 3rd in the NFL in red zone targets, which really good. And there have been points left on the board for him already. There have been some open plays where you can go back and find Trevor Lawrence just missing him and not seeing him. They had one against the Texans last week where he was running wide down the left side of the field, and Lawrence just didn't get the ball where it needed to be, and Thomas would have had a walk-in touchdown. So incredibly exciting. Just remember, this is a guy who ran a 1/10 of a second slower than Xavier Worthy, but has 60 extra pounds on him. Mm-hmm. So he's a big dog. He runs fast, and I mean, he is definitely one of the more exciting players in the NFL right now to watch. If only the Jags could be a little better.
And we'll see. Maybe the Jags will go on a little tear. It's kind of funny. The Bengals are 1-4, and nobody wants to quite write them off yet. Jags are 1-4, and everyone's just like, they're done. And I might fall in that camp too, but it is funny how the mind works.
Every season in the last 3 years, the Jags have gone on a 5-game win streak at some point during the season. Just throwing it out there.
It just sort of depends if it is if it happens in time or if it's too little too late, because I think we've seen both of those.
Yes.
For the Jags. All right. You mentioned Xavier Worthy, Dalton, and he is a guy who, I mean, you mentioned the missed opportunities for Brian Thomas Jr. That has kind of been that, and a couple big plays have been the theme of Xavier Worthy's season so far. He has 12 catches for $180, 2 touchdowns, also 6 rushes for 42 yards and 2 touchdowns. He is the wide receiver 20 on the season, which you would think, wow, top 20 for Xavier Worthy in the first month of the season in the Andy Reid offense. Like, I'm feeling pretty good. But people were really ready to scoop crap all over him after that Saints game the other day.
I mean, they were ready in the first quarter. There were people asking where Worthy was. And I understand, like, with the Rashee Rice injury, people were just supplanting those targets and that volume to Worthy, but the Chiefs didn't bother changing the offense, instead put Juju in that role, which I think is a perfect fit. What I will say about Worthy is if you drafted him highly, which I know most people did in their dynasties, you should have never expected great production. What I will say is this is the best production a rookie wide receiver has ever had under Andy Reid, going back all the way to guys like Deshaun Jackson. This is the best 4-game start for any rookie in an Andy Reid offense. And we know historically, Andy Reid offenses take time to come around and learn. And in spite of all of that, him and Mahomes haven't been on the same page. There have been deep shots that Worthy just hasn't gotten, where he's running wide open on crossers down the middle of the field. And there have been like short slant routes where 3 weeks ago, him and Rashee Rice were running the same route. And it turns out Rashee was running the wrong route, and Mahomes missed the target, but it would have been a Worthy catch across the middle. But the way this offense is utilizing him shows that he's like a significantly improved gadget to what people were thinking Mecole was a couple years ago. They've run him out of the backfield on jet sweeps. They handed the ball off to him with Travis Kelce against the New Orleans Saints. Like, I'm very excited about him because his route running was strong coming into the NFL. I think it's still strong, and I think a year in the NFL is going to do well for his size and his hand game. What he needs to get better because he is still losing in press situations.
Yeah, which I think that's probably mostly going to be an issue for him, which is okay. I do just want to say 5 games. We're 5 games into the NFL. You said 4 last. I want to make sure 5 games. I don't want to confuse people as far as that goes. So you mentioned best rookie receiver through 4 or 5 games under Andy Reid. I went back and looked at Rashee Rice through 5 games last season. Reminder: this is Xavier Worthy, 12 catches for $179, 2 touchdowns, and 6 rushes for 42 yards and 2 touchdowns. So over 200 yards and 4 touchdowns. Rashee Rice through 5 games as a rookie last year, 17 catches, 173 yards, and 2 touchdowns. 1 carry for -3 yards. So he is not saying he's going to outpace Rice for the whole season because Rice obviously turned it on. We'll see if he can. But through 5 games, he is outpacing what Rashee Rice started at last year. Would it surprise you if I told you that first read targets in the Saints game, Xavier Worthy was actually number 1 on the Chiefs in that game?
Yeah, that would.
27% first read targets for Xavier Worthy in that game. 23% for Travis Kelce, 18% for Juju Smith-Schuster. And I mean, there's the one over route where he is open, and it just so happens that Mahomes has a guy in his lap, and it is his left. Another 1 or 2 throws around the line of scrimmage that just a better throw, and maybe Worthy gets like another 10 yards or so and a reception. Obviously, so a few missed opportunities there. We've all talked about and seen the missed opportunities earlier in the season. And see, here's the thing. Before this game, Nate Taylor on his podcast said the role may increase after the bye week, but for this Saints game, we're just going to try and get to the bye week. And we're going to try and do a lot of the same stuff we've been doing, basically, is what he predicted. And, we'll see. And he predicted the Kareem Hunt thing pretty much exactly. So I'm willing to give Nate the benefit of the doubt that he may know a thing or two as far as that goes. You also had Troy Aikman drop the offense as the season goes on. And he already has a big part, but it sounded like even a bigger part. And just because he says it doesn't mean it's going to happen. But he's saying that because the team is telling him that. And part of why the Saints game went like it did, the Chiefs played a lot of heavy personnel. And the Chiefs have been very good in heavy personnel over the last few years. The other night, I don't know if that is a sustainable formula. Now, with that said, we do it rest of season, but I do think his role will continue to increase. And even just like think about some of the jet sweeps and little bubble screens and things like that McCole Hardman is getting. I mean, if we just give a little bit of that to Xavier Worthy, which as we go on, I do expect that to happen. I just think he's going to be want for fantasy down the stretch. And I think Juju kind of could be too. But that down the stretch, I think Xavier Worthy is going to have a nice rookie season. Still bullish on him long term too.
Yeah, and post-bye rookie is really where the bump happens. So excited to see what he does in week 7.
Mm-hmm. All right, we do have a question in the chat. Should I trade Breece Hall for Amon-Ra St. Brown? Full PPR. And Brown, I had Breece Hall number 1 overall before the season. Not feeling great about that. We'll talk a little bit about the Jets later. Obviously, they fired their coach. We'll see if that changes things. Something tells me Nathaniel Hackett is still there. You don't feel great about the situation. But straight up, Breece Hall, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Who are you taking rest of season?
Yeah, I'm taking St. Brown. I would do that trade for a couple of reasons. One, I think Braylon Allen's been too good to not be on the field, so there's not like an 80%, 90% touch case for Breece Hall right now. And the second thing is, I'm a little worried about like who's running that show right now in New York.
I think that's valid. We don't know who their head coach is right now.
Well, no, it's Jeff Ulbrich, their defensive coordinator.
Oh, I completely missed that and all the drama.
But like Nathaniel Hackett is not a good offensive coordinator. He hasn't been.
I think it's so funny it leaked out that Robert Saleh was gonna fire Nathaniel Hackett and then he got fired.
Yes.
He wanted to get that out there, and you know what? Respect. I would have done the same exact thing.
And in the least disrespectful way possible, like Breece Hall's RB2 season last year was in part because he was a PPR merchant. He just got a ton of targets. And Aaron Rodgers is not doing that. And part of that is because Rodgers has like a higher understanding of the game and knows checkdowns won't win a game. But part of that is he's a very specific guy in who he chooses to target. He always been his whole career. And there's just probably going to be more bad games from this offense. And to fire their head coach when they have a chance to be in top of the AFC East Monday night when they play the Bills.
Yeah.
Like that is a wild thing to do. And I question where the locker room is at and how everybody feels about it.
They really told Robert Saleh that this game in London against an undefeated team is must win or you will lose your job. I mean, if you're going to fire the guy, just fire him before the season. We all knew what Robert Saleh was as a coach. I know it was Zach Wilson, but we saw enough clearly. I mean, even with Aaron Rodgers, this is what it is. So like that whole thing is just insane. So yeah, it pains me to take the Amon-Ra St. Brown side because of how I felt about Breece Hall in the preseason. Now, I don't think that Braylon Allen is going to have any standalone value, and we can jump right into that in a second if you want. But it is just annoying enough, and the situation is such as far as like the O-line has not been good this year at all. I mean, there's just so many clips of guys, especially just this last week, getting stuffed in the backfield, and Amon-Ra St. Brown is just the much safer side of the trade. Now, you could get burned, and Breece Hall could have a crazy run because he is that caliber of player. But the side that I am a lot more confident will be a top 5 guy at his position from this point forward is Amon-Ra St. Brown, especially in full PPR.
Yeah, and for first round picks, which is what both those guys are worth, you just need consistency. Yeah. And it's not there with Breece Hall, and I don't think it's going to be there this season. Part of consistency and knowing what you're going to get is knowing who the coach is. And they fired a defensive-minded head coach for a defensive-minded head coach and left a terrible offensive coordinator on that field. Firing your head coach after their offensive coordinator can't get 12 points against the Broncos is just a wild thing to do.
We'll get to this one before we move on here. Noah Embody says, rate my team, full PPR, 10-man, CJ Stroud, Josh Jacobs, Bijan, Achane, Travis Etienne, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, McBride, and Drake London. I mean, it's hard for me to a 10-team. It's just hard for me to visualize because I've mostly been a 12-team guy. That roster feels just so incredibly stacked, but I think most of them probably are in 10-teamers. But even with the ETN thing not going as planned and Achane not living up to hype, like you've had some guys I think who have been early disappointments this year because Josh Jacobs did not score any touchdowns until I think he finally got in this last week. But you've got 2 absolutely elite receivers. You have running backs that I think you're going to get good to very good production out of. It's really just going to be about choosing the right guy, which will be very hard on a weekly basis, start sit. But I think overall this team is good. And Drake London, feeling a lot better about him than you were in the first week or 2 of the season. So, yeah, I would say you feel pretty good about this team. Like, I'd give this team an 8.5 out of 10. And if I wanted to try and boost that, I would say try to trade 2 for 1, get a no-brainer stud running back to maybe pair with a Bijan and maybe even a Jacobs if you can, or maybe it's Achane.
Yeah, like an Achane ETN for Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah.
Would be a trade. But yeah, I mean, you have 4 players on that team who are perennial first-round picks in the draft. So really good team. I'd give it a 9 out of 10. It's going to do great things. I wouldn't be too worried at all.
Yeah. All right. back to the Chicago Bears for a brief minute here. We'll talk about Caleb Williams. We did a little bit earlier, but you know, it was a rough start to say the least. Part of it scheme, part of it just frankly deep ball accuracy has been an issue and still is an issue for Caleb Williams. You know, the routes these guys are running, the blocking, the running backs, like there's a lot of problems on this offense. And Caleb Williams for the first couple of weeks was contributing to that. I do think the last couple of weeks it has been much better. I know it was the Panthers, so I don't want to just box score Watts and say it was great from that game. But I think we are seeing some more accurate passes down the field. We're seeing him make some plays scrambling. He should have had a rushing touchdown. I said should have. It was a holding penalty got called back, but he had a rushing touchdown get called back. Otherwise, he has probably a closer to a 30-point game than 25-point game this last week. And the thing about Caleb Williams to me is the Bears have put so much trust in him at the line of scrimmage, and the processing is clearly there. And we see the raw talent. I think the deep ball stuff will continue to get better. I think in redraft, you're probably not feeling great still about Caleb Williams, but from a dynasty perspective and real football perspective, like I'm still feeling really good about what I've seen from Caleb and trying not to let what Jane Daniels has done through 5 weeks warp my expectations or what my expectations should be of a rookie quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say on this Caleb Williams situation is he's been good for real life purposes. And if I'm a dynasty holder of him, I am hoping that there is a way where this coaching staff gets revamped. Like I think a lot of the issues with Caleb Williams, same talk we had with Roma Dunze, have been coaching related. Chicago is getting by on a really strong defense, but they're not trotting out an offense that really players have been able to be successful in. Last year, Geno Smith had a down year in this Waldron offense. And 3 years ago, the only reason I think that offense in Seattle was any good that Waldron ran was Canales was there as the quarterback's coach. And I mean, this year, it's just a lot of the same Mickey Mouse routes. DJ Moore has shown his frustration with it. And I think it probably is impacting Caleb in a negative way. Obviously, it's hard to have more yards when, 1/8 of your passes are tight end screens to Cole Kmet. Like, it's just not a good philosophy. So I think he's done what we've expected out of him as number one pick and been a good player. And I think his ceiling still is unrealized in a lot of ways because of who their coordinator is.
Yep. All right, we do have a question from Rigo in the chat. Cannot help but think this could be someone in our Dynasty League because this is interesting. Who's better overall, Kyron Williams or Isaiah Pacheco? Just as a real-life player, I'm assuming here. Go ahead.
I mean, it has to be Kyron.
Yeah, I think
both
so.
Fantasy and real life.
As much as I love Pacheco, I do think it's Kyron.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't have to get too much into that. All right. Bucky Irving. I mean, we talked about Bucky recently too, so don't have too much more to add. I think we both agree. I mean, he's the RB38 through 5 weeks. He has 250 yards on 44 carries, 1 touchdown, 8 receptions for 46 yards through the air. Like, I think he's better than Rachaad White, but it doesn't seem like Rachaad White is going away. So as far as just as a player, I think Bucky Irving has exceeded my expectations for what I thought he would be this season. Just put stats aside, just how he's looked on the field. I wasn't honestly a huge fan of him as a runner in college, and he hasn't really even done the passing game stuff that much yet. And that's kind of Rachaad White's field, so maybe that'll kind of continue to be that way. But maybe Bucky Irving has some upside there too. But from a fantasy perspective, I think this will probably be a frustrating committee this season based on how things are shaping up right now.
Yeah. What I will say is for the price you paid for Bucky Irving, you're feeling a lot better than the price people were paying for Rachaad White.
Yeah. I mean, it was probably waiver wire for Bucky in redraft.
And Bucky got targets in that last game against the Falcons. He got 4 targets, and Rachaad White got 3 targets for -3 yards. I know that viscerally because Rachaad White cost me a pretty hefty sum on a parlay where he just needed 25 receiving yards, and he couldn't even do that.
He needed 25, and he was 28 off.
yeah. Think about that. So obviously we've never been fans of Rachaad White as a rusher, and Bucky has done better than it. It's really hard to dispute that after 5 games in this NFL season. So wheels up for Bucky going forward. Rashad White has one more year left in Tampa, and I would be pretty surprised to see a fifth year there.
I would too, but we shall see. I mean, he was not a first-round pick, right? Or was he?
No, he was not.
I was going to say he wasn't a first-round pick, so he doesn't have a fifth-year option. And yeah, I would be surprised if they hand out a new contract, or maybe they will, but I just don't think that is probably good business for Tampa at this point. I mean, paying Baker, not a lot, but not an insignificant amount compared to like a rookie quarterback or something. And then you're paying two receivers, and you've got worse on the line. Like you've got some big contracts on that offense, and you could probably stand to add some guys on defense. So you probably don't want to pay Rashad White, who hasn't proven to be very good as a runner in the NFL. All right, we mentioned him earlier, Braylon Allen. I mean, he has been better than I would have expected, but I still just don't know what you do with him other than just stash as a handcuff. He's the RB37. He has 32 carries and 11 receptions. He has turned those in for a little over 200 total yards and 2 total touchdowns. He has had some real highlights this year, like running guys over, looking very impressive. And he's also just had a lot of plays where he's been tackled in the backfield because the Jets' offensive line. And Breece Hall is still pretty much dominating the snaps. Now, they are getting Braylon Allen the ball when he's in there, but snaps-wise, it is still Breece Hall 70-30, 65-35, pretty much every week. So I just don't think this is a guy that has standalone value rest of season. And, I mean, he's always been an elite athlete. He's still super young, so I don't want to count him out of being a starting running back someday in the NFL, but it's probably not on this team with Breece Hall. And I just wonder if this is kind of one of those guys. He doesn't fit the small running back build of the number 2 that everyone wants to see go be a number 1, but he does kind of fit the maybe limited skill set. Don't want to give him the ball 15 to 20 times a game. Like maybe a little bit of Lamar Miller in him, where it's like he's perfect. If you give him 10 to 12 touches, he can be productive in that. I kind of think that's what he might be in the NFL.
Yeah, what I'll say is if you draft him in Dynasty, he was like a 3rd-round pick, and you're feeling pretty good about your outcome. He's in that like Tyler Algier range for me, where he's a higher-end handcuff and somebody who in troubled times you can start in the flex spot and hope for modest production. The problem is, just like with Tyler Algier and some of these other higher-end backups, he's never going to be the starter without injury. Like you're just not supplanting Breece Hall, and I don't think there's a good argument to be made for a Lions split in this offense where it's a 60-40 or 50-50 because Breece Hall is simply too good.
Yeah.
So he's a long-term stash. He's the youngest player in the NFL, so that's good news.
Yeah.
You can double his age, and he still wouldn't be the age of Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, I'm feeling good. He's been better than I expected, and he would have been a starter in a lot of places at this point. But he will not be a starter for the foreseeable future in the NFL.
Yeah. Okay, last guy here, Brock Bowers. I mean, it is really a sign of what the tight end position is right now, that Brock Bowers is the tight end 1 through 5 weeks. And I don't really feel like people are talking about him, and we saved him for last on the show. I mean, he made the thumbnail, but we're still saving him for last on the show. He's the tight end 1. He has 28 receptions for 313 yards and 1 touchdown. And it's a little bit hard to forecast the rest of the season for him because Antonio Pierce said some things today that made you think, okay, maybe Devontae Adams is there, but also there still seems like a good chance to me that he's not. So don't really know how to kind of parse that. And I mean, I guess Aiden O'Connell is the quarterback now. Are they splitting reps in practice this week still? I don't know. Like, it's just kind of a mess, predictably, in Vegas this year under Antonio Pierce. But one thing is for sure, Brock Bowers, like Malik Neighbors, and to a slightly lesser extent, Marvin Harrison Jr. has looked about like what I thought he would as an NFL player through 5 weeks. And I think that is the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot to say. Tight end 1 at the position, excelling in a shitty environment despite of that. Getting what we wanted. He got an end around. Playing like he's at Georgia. Hayden Winks, you said athletic testing was the most important thing for tight ends, and he tested hourly and he was going to be bad. Good one on you, buddy. But there's not a lot to say. And when Davante Adams is off the field, his target share is up to 38%.
Oh my God. I mean, he leads the team with a 22% target share right now. So that is obviously is a big reason why 38% with that.
Yeah. Wow. And I don't think Davante Adams is going to be on the field through trade or fake injury one way or another. I don't know if he's going to be out there in a Raiders uniform anytime soon.
Hey, man, the Raiders said they wanted to get this done as quick as possible, but also get as much as possible. Now they're saying, hey, he might be back. He is working. He is working to get back on that field. Just trust us, guys. I don't know if you
saw this. I thought it was just funny, but Bill Belichick on the Underdog show said it's insane that they expect a second-round pick for him. You know what the Robert Kraft, Bill Belichick Patriots traded for with a second-round pick?
I don't, but I do
what wide receiver?
What wide receiver?
You don't even know who he was. A San Francisco 49er. It's not Kendrick Bourne. I'll take him off the list now, so you don't do that.
Oh God, I don't know that. I was gonna say Kendrick Bourne. Now I have no idea.
The Patriots traded a second-round pick for Mohamed Sanu.
Oh my God, I do remember that. Yeah.
And Bill Belichick is out here lecturing them for trying to get a second for Davante Adams.
Look, I mean, he's right. Based on what guys like Stephon Diggs went for in the offseason, it was probably like, I think if you do one of those like value charts for draft picks, I think it came out around a third-round pick. I think that's probably more realistic, and we'll see if someone gets desperate or if the Raiders will kind of fold. The thing that is working against them is the team that should probably be the most desperate is the Chiefs, and they probably won't be. And I mean, I always think this stuff is dumb in sports. Like you should don't want to trade to a rival, don't want to trade to within the conference, whatever. I always think that's dumb, but I think that is probably the case in this situation. Like the Spurs didn't want to trade Kawhi Leonard to the Lakers or the Clippers, just couldn't do it, especially the Lakers. And the Raiders can't trade Davante Adams to the Chiefs. Just can't do it. Guess what, guys? You guys are not playing the same sport, competing for the same thing as the Chiefs for at least the next couple of years.
Oh, no. We're going to trade to our division rival who's won the division 7 years in a row. And
they won the Super Bowl. They won the Super Bowl on your field last year. It does not get worse than that.
It does not. Yeah, probably won't be. Ravens would be kind of cool in a lot of ways. But outside of
not for fantasy, that would not be cool for fantasy.
But it'd be cool. It'd be cool. But no.
The coolest one for fantasy is definitely Buffalo. That'd be the least cool from a Chiefs fan perspective, however. Yeah. Okay, but yeah, Brock Bowers. I mean, he's going to have boom weeks. He's going to have bust weeks. There'll be more bust than not. I say more bust than if Davante Adams is not there. If he is there, but. I mean, that's just a tight end position. He can be like George Kittle and be a top 3 to 4 tight end rest of season, I think, and have huge weeks and have weeks where you're mad you started him. And that's just how it goes for basically every tight end, even Travis Kelce this year. I mean, he's been good the last couple of weeks. We'll see what he does going forward without Rashee Rice and obviously Hollywood Brown. But I don't think he's probably going to be tight end 1. But he's probably going to be a top 5 tight end, which you're happy in all formats and league types with that out of Brock Bowers this year.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong. I would keep him. He's definitely not going to stay tight end 1 because he's pacing 0.6 points ahead of George Kittle, who missed a full game.
Yeah.
But he's been spectacular for a rookie start.
Yep, absolutely. All right, real quickly before we get out of here, we do have one last question from Calvo in the chat. Start 1 PPR, Amari Cooper, Josh Downs, Jameson Williams. Without remembering who all of these guys play off the top of my head, can maybe pull that up. My instinct is to lean Josh Downs. He already got a lot of volume last week. I think that'll probably even go up as we look forward without Michael Pittman. This week, I said with Pierce earlier that I might feel better if it was Joe Flacco, and I'm not totally sure about that. But I do think with Josh Downs, I feel better if it is Joe Flacco. If it's Anthony Richardson, I'd maybe look to Jameson Williams next. I just can't. Even if Amari Cooper, I think, is probably still the best real life player. I mean, this offense and this quarterback have been so far and away the worst in the NFL this year that I just cannot start anybody. And the only guys I'm even thinking about starting are at those scarce positions. Jerome Ford and David Njoku. And I don't even want to start them, but I would at least consider it as things stand right now. Amari Cooper, I cannot consider.
Yeah, I'd lean Josh Downs. Even before Richardson went down in 2 weeks ago, Josh Downs is getting some good volume. Jameson Williams is a little exciting playing a bad Dallas defense, especially without Micah Parsons. Yeah, but on Amari Cooper, I mean, I think the wide receivers in Cleveland have kind of given up. If you watch,
I mean, who can blame them, really?
If you watch some cut-ups, I don't even think they're running routes at full speed. I don't think until Jameis Winston walks out onto that field and plays for the Cleveland Browns, I'm not starting any pass catcher not named David Njoku. And that's simply because of where the tight end position is. Josh Downs, there's some good volume there. We still haven't got to see him do a lot of the deeper route concepts, which he might have more access to without Michael Pittman. And I do think he's an incredibly talented player. So I would start him on talent and offensive environment being the most likely. I could see the Lions walking into Dallas and just absolutely hit stopping the Dallas Cowboys and Jameson Williams not being needed.
Yeah, and I think probably I think Downs is the answer. I think if you're needing to shoot for the moon, I don't think it's crazy to start Jameson over Downs, but Downs is definitely the much safer bet and the guy that I would go with. All right, Dalton, that is going to do it for episode 156 of the Half Point Per Podcast. Give us a follow, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Half Point Per Podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube. The link to all of those things in the show notes, as always, also on the bottom of this YouTube video right here. The show is available anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, all of that. Thank you all so much for listening today, and we will talk to you again next week.